When I wrote my book New Ideas in the Nimzo many years ago, it just concerned itself with the latest innovations at the time and the most important games, and yet it ran to nearly 300 pages. So I had to ask myself, how am I going to present the Nimzo Indian for black in a short video? And the answer is I've decided to pick a repertoire, hopefully a very effective repertoire for black that will cut out most of the theory and yet will give black good chances to win. On the third move, the Nimzo Indian is characterised by the pin of the knight on c3 by the bishop. And it's basically a positional opening. Here he's fighting for control of e4. He's trying to stop white from playing e4 and getting at the massive centre. But also he very often captures on c3 at some point to ruin or weaken the white pawn structure and plays against this weakness on the queen side. But there's also a third theme that comes into the Nimzo quite often, and that is that simply white wastes time trying to capture the bishop, get the bishop pair. Certainly he wastes even more time if he's trying not to weaken his pawn structure at all. And black gets a slight lead in development. Now this lead in development can often translate into good tactical chances for black, good piece play, quick piece play, and this is where I've decided to concentrate this repertoire as much as possible. I have hopefully found a repertoire that will give you good tactical chances and hopefully win lots of games. This second game features two world-class grandmasters who need no introduction. Artur Yusupov is playing white and former world champion Anatoly Karpov has the black pieces. The same-ish variation, which is introduced by a3, is in many ways white's most direct method. White takes the bishop pair immediately, then tries to set up a strong centre supported by his bishops, which will then roll forward. Black, on the other hand, will attempt to fix the pawn structure and concentrates his attack on the c4 pawn, which can no longer be defended by a rook from behind. One of the best players of the black pieces is former world champion Anatoly Karpov. Black captures on c3, white recaptures, and black plays c5. Now the main line here is 6e3, but should also note that sometimes white plays 6f3, which can be met by d6, white plays e4, knight c6, and then black will play b6, castles, bishop a6, knight e8, much as in the main game. You should note that this could transpose from the line we looked at in the previous game. After 4f3, c5 had white played a3. Now the main line here is 6e3, knight c6, bishop d3, castles, knight e2, b6. Important move. This is the first part of the black plan of attack on c4. Now the move defends c5, which is important because it blocks the white c-pawns and significantly reduces their dynamic potential, and prepares not to play the normal bishop b7, but in fact it prepares to play bishop a6 and knight a5, which wins the c4 pawn. White plays e4. Now black will play knight e8. Why? Well, consider what might happen if he allows white to pin his knight on f6 with the bishop on g5, which has just become possible since the white e-pawn advanced. Breaking the pin on f6 with h6 and g5 would be too weakening, as black has now castled. So black avoids this altogether with this move knight e8. And it's a very important concept, first played by Capablanca. And you should be very careful to remember to play this move, because otherwise nasty things might happen. White castles, and now black continues with his main plan of attack on c4. Bishop a6, f4. This is a second key moment in this game. White is threatening to play f5 and then f6 with a strong attack on the king side. So to avoid this, black must block the white f-pawn, and sooner rather than later. And this explains his next move, f5, obviously stopping the f-pawn dead in its tracks. White plays knight g3, which puts pressure on the f-pawn. The f-pawn is getting in the way of his game at the moment, what he wants to do. And black solidly defends it again. There's a second possibility. He could also have defended f5 by playing his knight to d6, if he prefers. It's a question of taste, really. And white plays bishop e3. He had a number of choices in this position. Against most of them, black could continue with knight a5 or knight to d6, or perhaps both moves. And then he would simply take the white c-pawn, which can only be defended basically by the bishop and queen. Once black had taken the white c-pawn, he would be better. And providing he doesn't get mated or doesn't lose material, doesn't make any blunder, he should go on to win. In this position, black captured to stop the pressure on c5, and then played d5. C takes d5, bishop takes d3, get rid of the light squared bishops. Queen takes. F takes e4, queen takes e4, and queen takes d5, which is the point of this little exchanging combination. After exchanging white's better bishop, black leaves white with his pawn stuck on dark squares, which inhibits his remaining dark squared bishop. I think you can see that the pawns on f4 and d4 are getting in the way of the bishop on e3. White captured, and black recaptured with the pawn. Rook ac1, rook c8. Now, in this position, if white did nothing, black would play knight d6, when he could post his knight on e4 or f5 or c4. He's got great squares for his knight. The white bishop would begin to look very poor. So white has to play f5 here. He managed to advance one of the pawns that's getting in the way of his bishop, although he will never be able to get rid of the d4 pawn. Knight d6. Finally, this knight moves from e8 and takes aim at c4. As although the c4 pawn is long gone, the c4 square will still provide a great outpost for the knight. F takes g6, h takes, rook takes f8 check, king takes, h4, and now black played knight c4. This is very often a thematic move in the Nimzo Indian, and in this particular case it forks the bishop on e3 and the a3 pawn. White moves his bishop, and black took on d4. So black's now pawn up. h5, pawn takes, rook f1 check, king e8, knight takes h5, knight takes a3, knight g7 check, and here white's desperately trying to generate some counterplay, as otherwise he's simply 2 pawns down for nothing. King to d7, rook f7 check, regaining one of the pawns, king goes to c6, rook takes a7, knight ac2. Now this endgame is a fairly trivial win for black. He's got a good extra pawn. His king is now better, more active than its opponent. But white, of course, tries to make a draw. You never know, there's always a chance with so few pawns remaining. b5, g4, b4, past pawns must be pushed. Rook a2, b3, the pawn marches towards the queening square. Rook b2, king c5, the king comes up to try and force the rook away. Knight f5, rook g8, little tactic to get rid of white's g-pawn before it becomes dangerous. Knight takes d4, it's an in-between move, rook takes g4 check, king f2, knight takes d4, and now white played bishop takes d4, king takes d4, rook takes b3, where he wins another pawn, but unfortunately for him, after black's next move, rook e4, which cuts the white king off, this is a simple technical win for black. So white simply resigned.